Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie Hope, and I am your host and coach for Time to Come Alive. An opportunity for us to gather every week and have some great conversations that help us become more conscious, helps us become more connected, and also creative as a result. And again, I don't know why, or how this happens, but the universe always brings me interesting people to talk to, and I'm fascinated by their stories and what they have to offer. And today's no different. I'm going to introduce you to my special guest in just a few moments. Before we get started, though, couple things. One is, if you're on Facebook Live, please share this as a watch party on your page so that people can join in the conversation and see what you're seeing, and therefore enhance your own life and your conversations with your friends and your connections. And also, as you're watching this, whether you're with us live on Zoom or on Facebook, comment some of the things that you're learning, any insights you have, questions as we go through the conversation. And there'll be a point where I will actually unmute the line. So if anyone has a comment or question they'd like to ask, you're able to do so. Or on Facebook Live, you'll obviously type in whatever you want to know, and I'll share with my special guest. Now, before my grand introduction, just because I like keeping the suspense, we're just going to take a moment to prepare our ears and our heart for the conversation we're about to have. And I like to do that by just spending just a small moment in mindfulness. And what that looks like today is wherever you're sitting or standing or wherever you are, make sure that you're in a safe place. And I'd like for you to just find yourself feeling grounded, centered, wherever you are. And with that, think about this wonderful body of yours and give it a nice, deep cleansing breath. You might find closing your eyes or even unfocusing your gaze a little bit might be helpful, because you can focus inward more easily. Now, I want you to relax a bit, but also remain alert. Remain alert to what's happening around you. Just take another deep breath. Become more aware of your body, this finely tuned instrument that sometimes goes out of tune, but nonetheless, it does some beautiful things for us. And I want this moment for you to acknowledge some of the things that your body provides for you. It's clearly a vehicle for your thoughts, for feelings, for sensations. But think of a way in which your body has served you. And give it appreciation for that. Perhaps is your ability to walk. Perhaps your body serves you by helping you drive. Perhaps play with your family. Dancing, maybe a sport. There's all sorts of movement that our body allows us to use to express itself. Perhaps is painting or planting flowers. Lifting groceries, taking care of people, of the ill, or cleaning. Maybe it's just your body's information system. Your body lets you know when you're tired, hungry, or feeling a little cold or too warm. I want you to find a few things that you can be grateful for that this body of yours is providing for you. And also think about the things that we're not always keenly aware that our body's providing for us. We obviously don't have to think about breathing or our heart beating, our cells multiplying, systems in our body that heal, our mind making connections, our brain making connections, neural connections, so that we remember or we learn. So many automatic processes that we have to thank this body for. Take another deep breath. Nice high five for your body being able to carry and support you through life. And then you might refocus your gaze, and come back. Great. Awesome. We're going to start now by introducing our guest and getting to this very fascinating conversation. My guest today is Heather Lynn Darby. I don't know why I like to say your middle name, Heather. It just feels like it rings, it flows. Heather Lynn Darby. And I met curiously at a women's networking group. It's a very small, intimate group. And we just happened to sit next to each other, chit-chatted a little bit, connected on social media. And then we met coincidentally at this small business expo here in Dallas, Texas. But what I didn't know is that when we met, we took a selfie together just to say, hey, we're at the expo. This is fun, because she and I are both we're both entrepreneurs and we're growing and building our business. And then I posted the photo online on Facebook and tagged Heather, of course. Well, what happened afterwards was so shocking. Her sister responded to my post, and her sister was one of my residents when I was a resident assistant at the University of Alabama a couple decades ago, at least.
Small world.
It's a super small world. She and her husband, her sister and her sister's husband both went to school with my brother and I. So I thought that was just a fantastic small world experience. So the universe was actually conspiring for us to sit and talk and then also meet up, Heather. I'm so to have you here. And I know I don't know tons about your story, but you've been so enthusiastic about sharing about health and some of the work that you've done that I thought, okay, you know what? Let's have this conversation online. So I think it would be a fantastic way to introduce health, which is sometimes a little shaky for some of us to manage. But welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just really excited to be here and on your platform and sharing with your audience and connecting with people.
Yay! And you've been a great supporter. So I always like to ask, let people, I don't force anybody to do this. I'm not paying anybody to do this. This is out of your own heart. But I'm curious about why you said yes to being on this program.
Oh, right. So we're entrepreneurs, right? And I work with people as a coach, and I'm trying to become more comfortable being visible online. So this has been a project that's been ongoing for about a year and a half, and I was kind of already primed to say yes because I'm trying to just raise some visibility. I started out making my own YouTube series that's about coaching and chronic stress, which is my area of focus. And then now I'm like, okay, now maybe reach out a little bit more. So, but I had been following you ever since we met. I'm like, oh, someone else that's doing a series. I'll follow and see what they're doing. And I just fell in love with the way that you've structured it, that it's very conversational and not so like structured interviewee.
I don't like the structured interviewee style.
And I'm so robotic. I'm like, I must know what I'm going to say. So I'm very like free-flowing today. We don't know what I'm going to say.
Well, I love something because when you and I talked about that, you also mentioned, it was interesting that you have a tendency to, when you're sharing information, that you go to the scientific a little bit more, right? More factual, perhaps more academic approach. And that the other piece of this conversation for you was an opportunity to peel back on some of the emotional drive that you have. And that's really the purpose of Time to Come Alive, is really to like peek under the hood, if you will, of a person's heart, of a person's passion for something. So I'm curious about, what is it that had you want to express this personal side of you? What do you see possible?
Well, when people are dealing with their health, usually nothing is going to change until they come to some kind of crisis point. And it could be relatively minor, or it could be like life-shattering kind of crisis. But usually there's something that has an emotional component that makes them want something different than what they're doing. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I thought that if I could share a little bit of my story and how my health made a difference in dealing with the things that happen to us in life, if that resonated with somebody, if they could identify a little bit with my story, then maybe it would help them take the next step to change little things in their life so they'll be better prepared with their health and emotional resilience to weather a storm, a crisis in their life.
Got it. So I hear a couple of things. For you, this not only is a way to really push yourself a little bit more, because
personally,
just the visibility factor, but then also to connect with people. This is an act of contribution that you really want to make sure that people connect to this. So And I purposely did not ask you very many questions before we had this conversation about your past, but I'm curious about at what point did you realize that managing your health is something that was going to be a passion project?
Right.
It's weird to say that, right? Because like managing your health being a passion project, it should be for everybody, but not.
Right.
I don't relate to it that way always.
Right. It's something that's on the back burner or kind of off, not not being attended to in their life. They have so many other things going. I have this. I don't know if you're familiar with the 4-burner theory, but imagine you have a stove, right? You can't have 4 pots going at full tilt on 10. Something's going to burn or boil over while you're attending the other thing. Like you can't manage everything on 10 all at once. So some things have to maybe get turned down while you place more focus. And sometimes people have, maybe you have to take something off the stove while you attend to something that's, on full tilt. So anyways, I often make references to cooking too, but so many things in my life have related to my dad went to school to be a cook. When I was young, I was very interested in science. And one of the little experiments I did, I took to science fair, like state science fair or whatever. I had pet gerbils and I did a nutritional experiment on them. And this is way back in the 70s and probably they wouldn't let kids do this now, but one of them I fed, I had 2 little groups, 2 groups of 3. And one of them I fed regular kibble from the pet store that's like nutritionally balanced for my little gerbils, and they were fine. And then the other one, I fed them just like more of a natural diet of seeds and nuts and just like a higher quality. So imagine pellets or like fresh sunflower seeds and stuff. So in my mind, I was like, this is a great experiment. And I measured their water and I had a little run for them where I could measure how active they were. And I weighed them and, all these other little metrics, right? And I was 10. And I took it to science fair and I did really well, actually. I was 10 and I was in the group of all the way to high school where they were going to go to college. And I recall I won like 5th place or something like that. So, didn't win the science fair, but it was a respectable experiment. And so that's the first dot, right? That I was interested in nutrition and I had this idea that the quality, and the title of it was, is the USRDA enough? Right?
Okay, wait, all of this at age 10?
Yes.
Playing with my Barbies and probably just telling my brothers to stay out of my room or something like that. I don't recall ever having an inkling that putting some science project together and logging it and challenging a government agency in the process.
I know, right? With my title. I'm so sad.
Wow. All right. That's fascinating. So talk to us a little bit about what is it about nutrition that seemed to spark your interest? And obviously you knew from a very young age that was something that was important, but how has that been a thread through your life?
Well, when I was 16 or maybe, 16, I decided I was going to be vegetarian. I was in like an anatomy class and all of a sudden it kind of clicked to me. I'm like, wow, that looks really familiar, bone on muscle. Maybe a little too familiar for me of I'm eating a chicken off the bone. And I'm like, I don't think I like this anymore. And just my soft little heart was like, I don't think I'm going to eat animals anymore. And my dad, who I mentioned was a chef, food was very important in our family. He was like, well, I'm not cooking 2 meals. If you're not eating what we're eating, then you can have a peanut butter sandwich. Go make yourself a peanut butter sandwich. And you can live off of peanut butter sandwiches for a long time, but it's not the best healthy balance of nutrients. And of course, nobody knew this at the time. They're like, you're healthy, you're doing well in school, like you're fine, you do what you want, right? And so it wasn't until I moved out on my own, like the second I turned 18, I was like, I'm out. I had a bunch of sisters and brothers, and I was like, it's too noisy here. I'm just gonna go off and get an apartment off campus, right? I went to Georgia State. They didn't really have on-campus housing, but still I was like, I'm gonna get an apartment. I'm just gonna move out, just gonna buy my own food, get a job and do whatever. I'm super independent being the oldest. And I happened to work in the university library And then I discovered there was like a wall of cookbooks about vegetarian cooking. I'm like, really? I didn't know anyone else who was vegetarian. Like, I don't know where I got this idea. So it exploded on my scene that this was a thing that other people did. So then I found out a little bit more about like other reasons to be vegetarian, how to do it more healthy. That's when Diet for a New World was big and food balancing was like a thing. Anyways, so I learned even more about nutrition than I learned about the nutrients as far as now we call them macros, right? The protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and also alcohol, the macro they don't want you to know about. And, you know, and I had my life, right? I was going around being vegetarian. And so that's my background of nutrition.
So I'm curious about, so this, you mentioned being independent from your family, but food, at least from your father's perspective, was a very important part of it. How did your relationship with your family influence, beyond becoming a vegetarian? I don't know if you lived on peanut butter and jelly until you were 18, but how do you reconcile those two, your path in nutrition, but also your family life?
Well, my family has, everyone has like their family health history, right? So mine is generational obesity and heart disease. Pretty much everyone in my family died of a heart attack. So we're all kind of more aware of the risk factors that might go into that. And, you know, struggling with weight your whole life and trying to find a balance, especially when you're someone who, with minimal knowledge, just kind of cut out a whole food group, right? Without understanding how to make up for the nutrients that might be lacking from such a wide brush to just sweep a bunch of stuff away as neat. So anyways, I was just kind of always hyper aware of weight, the food I was eating and stuff like that, but not being very educated in nutrition science. I was eating like super heavy carbs, sandwiches, right? So there was a lot of just extra calories in that, which as I went through like later in life, I'm like, oh, that makes sense because, you know, processed foods that have super low amount of fiber aren't very filling. So in order to feel full and satisfied, and also the cultural normalness of what is a portion, you know, just had a caloric over excess, right? And so just slow creeping weight gain. But it didn't get really bad until I got a desk job. And I thought, oh my gosh, being in a safe office, you know, working with my brain with a computer. Computers were just coming out at that time. The web was just coming out at that time. And I was like, great, I'm going to sit in my office and do my wonderful work and have a great life and go home and be entertained by my friends on Usenet, right? And we'll all have great conversations and stuff. I wasn't into TV at that time. I think we talked about Usenet a little bit. It was like a bulletin board system before there was the World Wide Web. And I had a bunch of friends. So I was sitting in front of the computer at work. I was sitting in front of the computer at home. And now we know that sitting causes creeping weight gain and different kinds of metabolic disruptions. And so my health was being eroded by the work that I thought was so safe. And I'm like, what kind of irony is that?
You also mentioned, I want to go back to something because I think that might also tie into some of the things that you're doing now. You mentioned that the amount of stress that you're experiencing in your family of origin. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, I think I'm a little bit predisposed to stress. So I didn't have very good coping skills. I had like withdrawal skills. So I was always nose in a book, tuning out whatever was going on around me. And the stress in my home was just the loudness of having so many kids and like my parents doing the best they could, right? And I was very introverted, somewhat shy. I still have those characteristics. And I just wanted to be alone. So as soon as even before I worked at the university library, I worked at the local public library. I was like, they'll pay me to sit here and like put all these books in order? Oh yeah. So I was always like wanting to be in quiet places, work with my brain. And so I never gained very many coping skills for stress.
What kind of stress though? I mean, I get that you have a lot of large family. You have 4 siblings, I believe you said, right?
Oh, high expectations for academic success.
Okay, break that down for us. And that's a cat, by the way, in case you're trying to figure
Oh
out
my gosh, hang on.
in the
What I'm
corner.
doing is trying to make my cat be quiet. This is Grisabella the glamour cat. She is 21 years old and she
Oh,
probably wants down now, so I'm going to let her go.
hi, Grisabella. Bye, Grisabella.
Okay, hopefully she won't meow her face off. I'm trying to make her be quiet.
Okay.
No, please be quiet. Okay. Anyway, so high academic expectations, not only just from myself, but I think from my family. My grandmother was a teacher, a high school teacher. Oh my goodness. Hang on.
She's not having it.
Bye.
Isabella the Glamour Cat. That's an interesting name, but we won't go into that right now.
It's from the musical Cats. So there, now we have an answer.
If you could share, can you give us an example, share a story where that the stress of having a high academic expectation in your family took a toll on you?
Oh, I do have a good story about that. So I was a senior in high school and I was writing up, maybe it was the end of the semester or something, like a cumulative paper. And the computers we had at the time, I think it was a Commodore, and you stuck the tape, remember cassette tapes? We stuck the cassette tape in there and it took so long. Like I was like flowing, right, and typing my stuff, and I wasn't saving regularly or maybe at all. Like I was just typing it and then I was going to save it. And one of the household pets ran behind and unplugged the computer and the whole thing was gone. And I was like, I can't even do it again. I just was like, the stress hormones made my brain literally not be able to think. I was like, what am I going to do? It's due tomorrow. I had already spent this much time. I can't even remember what I said. The idea of recreating that was like unthinkable. And I like gave up. I just went into my teacher the next day. I'm like, here's what happened. I'm not going to do it. I can't even. Before that was even a thing. I cannot even right now.
What
So,
grade were you?
in 12th grade.
I was 12th grade.
Right. And I was in, I had like a low A average, right? And so I was like, you know what, this is too much. I'm just not going to do it. It won't make any difference in the long run anyways. And I had high hopes to, so anyways, that was one thing. And then like later in life, I was taking college classes again. I had a stress crisis in my life and I had to drop out of my classes because my brain just wanted to shut down. I couldn't think coherently. I couldn't logic. I couldn't prose. I couldn't anything.
And what have you discovered that has the stress get to that point where it just kind of shuts down your ability to think? Although that's what stress does, right? But what is it about your brand specifically that has it get so high that it just stops you?
Yeah, I didn't have any coping skills. I didn't know what to do. I didn't realize it was a thing that could be impacted. I thought stress just happened to people. Like, and I didn't know that how anyone else coped with it because I was so isolated of myself. Like I had a very tiny, tiny circle of friends, maybe even only one friend when I was in high school. So not a big support network. Like things were crazy at home. There wasn't, like my parents were very nurturing and supportive or whatever, but I didn't feel like we had a close emotional relationship where I can be like, I'm under stress. Like I didn't have the words to even express that. I didn't have the concepts that even talk about that. And I didn't have the kind of relationship where I can be like, I don't even know what's wrong with me, right? And they had so much going on, it didn't occur to me to even like address this. So I was left to my own devices, and my only coping mechanism I knew was to bounce. Just, all right, I'm just going to turn the page or maybe close this book and move on and kind of not look back. And that repeated over the course of my life. I've moved I would say on average, I probably moved 30 times. I probably moved on average every year of my life, but sometimes more frequently because I know there's been sometimes I've stayed. And sometimes I just move apartment across town. I'm just like, I'm done here, whatever's going on. I'm just going to move to a different suburb or something. But sometimes I bounced across the country.
Wow. That's interesting. And that's just the physical movement, right? So 30 years or 30 times that you've moved locations. But I can imagine throughout all of those life happenings, it sounds like you also withdrew from people. I imagine that the relationship that you withdrew from, you know, maybe people didn't even know that you withdrawn from them. You just I haven't heard from Heather in a while.
Right? Yeah, that's kind of how
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So how is that now? Like, so moving obviously was one of your coping mechanisms, but then also withdrawing from relationships. Let's go back first of all. What was that way of disconnecting?
I'm sorry, say again.
What was the impact of that way of disconnecting from people? You know, withdrawing that way.
Well, I was just very loosely rooted emotionally as well as, you know, I didn't have roots in community. I didn't have like very many long-standing friendships that I carried from place to place. But when Facebook came around, that changed quite a bit. I was able to stay in contact with, you know, maybe the one or two people that I had made a connection with. And now I feel like that it's my primary way of staying connected with people. Since I still isolate myself to a certain extent, my coaching practice is entirely online. I work from home. So I have to force myself out into the analog world every couple of days.
Force yourself into the analog world.
Go outside and play.
That is interesting. Okay, so you said the emotional, right? The emotional roots were not very deep. So I'm curious about. My sense is when someone is, especially someone that's introverted, right? Gets your energy from within, that your roots for yourself are pretty deep. Like, you know, you really go and cultivate your own inner emotions more. So how does disconnecting from others, how did that connect you with yourself? How did you connect? Maybe the how, not like how did you connect then with yourself if you're not connecting with others? That's a better question.
I didn't connect with myself actually. What happened is that I identified strongly with my job. And my entire like self-image and self-worth was wrapped up in my career. And I was the primary, you know, whenever I was single, I was just supporting myself. And when I was in my marriage, I was the primary income earner. So when I got laid off from that, and that was really the turning point in my life, is when I got laid off from my job as a corporate accountant, and I had been sitting for now 20 years, my health had eroded, and I didn't have like strong social connections with people. I didn't have good health. I didn't have like a strong marriage. I didn't have like a good financial cushion. I was just kind of just making ends meet. And I was the classic person who was one paycheck away from everything falling apart, which when that kind of got pulled out from under me, and I didn't have that identity of being the income earner of our household, of being an accountant, like my identity was gone and I was very much at a loss. So it turned into an amount of depression. My marriage could not weather this financial crisis and me going into an emotional crisis. I started losing weight precipitously. People thought that I was sick with cancer or something. Like it was nearly 100 pounds within a year or a year and a little bit. And then, of course, the financial thing was falling apart. My house was foreclosed, and I ended up asking my brother to please take me back to the farm where my parents live in Michigan. So he flew in and drove me away, you know, with my cats. And so I could, you know, take some time to heal in a safe spot.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So like literally the bottom fell out, it sounds like.
Yep.
Many ways. And I think it's interesting. Just want to tie this in for people. So those of you who are listening or watching this live, please comment on the things that are resonating with you, or things that you might have questions around. Go ahead and start putting those in now, and I'll bring them up. But just to tie in a couple of things. So you were a person that disconnected from people to kind of preserve yourself, a self-protection mechanism.
Yes.
By withdrawing. But then you also mentioned you were not really that deeply connected to yourself. So you found a job, in this case, to connect to. And it sounds like in your relationship, maybe even connect to your mate. So you had very small, manageable relationships to connect to. But when the relationship and the job, the two primary things that you connected to ground yourself, are gone, all the health crisis kind of took over. Wow.
Yeah, and my health crisis was precipitated by it was very weak because I had gained weight, creeping weight gain from being in this sedentary work and home environment for so many years, that when something happened, it's called allostatic load. That's kind of a technical term because I'm super nerdy, but it's the total amount of stress in your life that exceeds your capacity. When it exceeds your capacity to deal with it, then you start having breakdown. And since I was already predisposed by being significantly overweight, pretty much weak, having like a depression already, when this happened, and that additional stress from all the things that, when the bottom fell out, like I had no more resources. So I was grasping for straws, and I already mentioned that I didn't have a super close emotional relationship with my parents, but I'm like, my parents have been married for about 50 years now. At that time, it was a little bit before their 50th. I'm like, they must have something right, and I know that it's somewhere safe that I can go. So even though I hadn't had that relationship before, I was like, I need to re-establish some of these relationships now. So I started building, like, whereas before I was very externally oriented for my identity, I started trying to be more internally reaching out.
What does that look like what do you mean by internally reaching out?
Like trying to reestablish the relationship with my parents.
How would you do that? What'd you do?
I moved in with them.
Oh, that will take a toll in and of itself, but okay.
Yeah. My house was foreclosed and my marriage was over, and I didn't have anywhere to go, and I couldn't get another job for whatever reason. I was unemployed for at least 2 years before I started getting temp work again. And then it was another 2 years before I got like a full-time job. And I had moved around several times during that time. But I spent almost a year with my parents, like really taking account of like my life and what I was doing and how had I got to this point and what was I going to do now. So I was like, okay, well, without my health, I'm not anything. And I had started with the emotional rebuilding and dealing with the fallout from my divorce and dealing with the logistics of like closing all that stuff down with the foreclosure and then eventually bankruptcy. And I had things I had to do. And I was in school. That's when I had to drop my classes. So I was like, okay, I can only do so much. My health is first. So I'm not going to look for work. I was just there with them. And it started to stabilize. And then I'm like, okay, so exercise, I heard, is supposed to help with mood. So I started doing a little bit more activities and walking around. And it's very quiet in Michigan because like no one lives there anymore.
No one lives in Michigan anymore. Well, at the time, maybe.
in this area near Flint, it's, first of all, Flint, we've heard what's happened there. There's been a big exodus of population. And this is even in the rural area outside of it. So it's very sparsely populated, very super peaceful, really like a lot of nature around. So it was a good place for me to kind of pull myself together. But anyways, then I got a little more into, fitness and walking around, and my parents decided they were going to join a gym, so I would ride with them. That's another thing. I don't drive. I have a phobia of driving. So it's just another thing in life that I'm like, not a good fit. I'm vegetarian. I don't drive. Like, I don't fit in the world somehow. I've always had this sense, right? But so I was like, back to the thing. I'm going to the gym with them. I'm like, this is really fun. And I had experienced yoga a couple of times. But I started like coming back to it. I'm like, oh, this breathing, this really makes a difference. And then I started investigating like the yogic breathing and how it related to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. Then I was like, oh, this is all starting to come together. If there are exercises and things that I can do to create resilience to stress, and then that can fix my metabolism, which was like out of control. Like I had lost 100 pounds, gained 100 pounds, you know, swung on this thing, and I was messing with my hormones so badly. I was like, how is this ever going to come to an equilibrium for me? And when I found out about the stress connection, it all came together and everything changed.
My goodness, Heather, that's that's quite the life that you've created so far.
Only half of it.
But I think one thing that I really want to tease out of all of that is that the ability to first of all, just be conscious of how much our emotions drive the quality of life that we have. Not just how we feel. It's not just what I hear from you. It's not just this, you had a feeling, but also the way in which you connected, the quality of connections that you had or the lack thereof, the seeking connection in other things, or even when you finally got to that point where you just didn't have anything else to connect to, going back to your family of origin and reconnecting, that there's something so inherently powerful about connecting to oneself, like actually being mindful of our emotions. I remember that, you know, in my family, we grew up, my dad was in the military, mother was a school teacher. We're pretty no-nonsense household for the most part. Although we had our fun times, most of our conversations were not around emotional topics, right. Talking about feelings. I remember not feeling comfortable crying in front of my family for years. It's just,
I didn't cry.
I have 3 brothers, that just crying was just not a strategy that was going to work for me. And I remember the moment I felt true sadness is when I was divorced. I got divorced, and this has now been about 15, 16 years ago. But that experience and not being able to fix it, not being able to think my way through it, there was a time, I remember it was during Christmas, that all of it just kind of, just unraveled. My mom was visiting, and somehow it was one of those dark nights of the soul, which ironically I began reading Thomas More's Dark Night of the Soul, thanks to my older brother. And I just didn't feel like cheering myself up. I just felt like being with that emotion. For the first time in my life, that being with an emotion was the only way for me to cope. And my mom tried so hard to cheer me up because she was visiting. She's like, you want to go to a basketball game? You want to go to a movie? You want to go to the mall? And I'm like, no, I'm just going to lie here and watch, the Godfather trilogy, which that was my first time watching The Godfather. It was so satisfying at the time. But I resonate so much with what you said about connecting to yourself and your emotion, and that being the springboard for all these different actions. Then you can actually think clearly enough to choose to get up, choose yoga, choose to start. At what point did you decide this was going to be a lifetime thing?
Oh, okay. So I got very curious. I can go really down a rabbit hole with like interesting things to me. And I was like, what is it about this stress? What is it about the parasympathetic nervous system that impacts like your emotions and your gut feelings and your digestion? And I was like, wow, there's a big connection here between the gut and the mind. I was like, if I'm eating too many processed foods, then I'm not getting enough fiber. And now we're finding out the gut microbiome impacts our emotions. So because I was eating out a lot when I was at my desk job, I was getting highly processed foods, and this was causing me depression. So learning about nutrition a little bit helped to lift the depression. While I was learning about the nervous system, I started to realize in connecting with other people, like I wouldn't make eye contact with people and I didn't smile. And I found out that the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, is some of its fibers on its way up meld with the facial nerves that notice when your corners of your mouth are lifted, when the corners of your eyes are crinkled, when you're smiling. And when you make eye contact with another person, it stimulates motor neurons in both of the people that creates a social connection. If anyone wants to get super nerdy, this is Stephen Porges' work on polyvagal theory and about the mammalian response, which makes us social creatures. And because
okay, whoa. I'm just gonna have to press pause for a second.
Yes.
I captured what you just said, the act of making eye contact with somebody and just a slight lift of the corners of the mouth and a crinkling of the eye is enough to stimulate vagus
Connection.
And connection.
And a feeling of safety between those two people, the seeds of trust, and that makes the parasympathetic nervous system turn on, that rest and digest. Once you realize that you're safe and that chronic stress can be inhibited by the parasympathetic nervous system turning on. So these are some of the exercises that people can do on their own. And it is what I did. I started a smiling meditation where I would just be like, and I had to literally start out, let me grab a pen. Here's what I did. It was so weird on my face to have a smile after I had been sad and depressed for so long. This is the exercise I did.
Really?
To hold my, because your brain doesn't know. It's getting the signals from the body to the brain that says, this is what's happening. And then the brain interprets it. If this is what's happening, that means this. If I'm smiling, that must mean I'm okay. And you kind of train, it's a training, just like an exercise, until I could do it by myself, until I could practice holding a Mona Lisa smile, right? Not grinning, not being crazy. Although there is laughter meditation now, laughter yoga, which combines the deep breathing and the longer exhales with smiling and eye contact with people. And it's a very powerful practice.
Okay, all right. This, yeah, wow, fascinating. That I hadn't learned before, and I love it. I have a smile that I've been complimented on before. I actually won a trophy in a pageant because of my smile. So it's like it's an award-winning smile. but that aside, I find it so fascinating that you talk about how not only that emotional connection is established, but the feeling of safety. Because that's huge, because the lack of safety is what creates the bad stress, right? The distress.
Yeah.
But okay, so smile meditation, because I think this is something super practical that people can take away with them right now. Can you share it with us, or can you give us a taste?
That's it. I mean, just
put a pen in your mouth and that's
if you can't, like, if you're sad, if the corners of your mouth and it feels like a mask, like you have to put them up there and feel it first. So that's just like a tiny exercise someone can do if they were so down as me, but they wanted to get started. But for most people in reasonable health, just first imagine that the corners of your mouth would lift a little bit, and then let them. And then that's it. And then you just, for a minute, or if you realize that your face has relaxed into more of a serious kind of face, just bring it back a little bit. And then soon it becomes the new normal. If you create this as a little habit in your life, after doing it for, I don't know, I did it for months, really, the first time, consciously practiced. And then it became a little bit more, I don't have to think about it as much.
Wow. I love that. And that might even counter some of the comments that I've seen in the media about I don't want to say the words, but the resting, the RB.
Oh, right.
Yeah. How do you see that tied into what you're describing?
I feel like a lot of people have underlying anger and stress, and it comes out, it manifests in the expression of the face. The emotions can make the face look a certain way, and if you put your face in a different position, it can make you feel a different way. It's a two-way street.
I love that. Because what you're basically saying is that if you really want to come to life, which is what this program's about, you want to come alive, just, smile. A smile, the shifting the muscles, literally just shifting the muscles. I think smile adds another layer of context because it's about friendliness and approachability. But you're not even saying that. What you're saying is that we literally can arrange the muscles of our face. And then if we do so in a way that creates that has a vagus nerve stimulated, that we actually bring on a sensation of wellness and well-being. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. I want to share a few comments. First of all, you're moving people here, Heather, by the way. You're you're connecting your emotions.
I'm so glad.
One is from Eva, is about, or I don't know if this is Eva. It sounds like my brother might be typing this in, but is that your story is very inspirational. First of all, it's inspired some people, and how you've aligned your life to heal and getting back to, connecting with your parents and restoring that relationship being so important. And that, what you're describing is essentially what's known as the hero's journey.
Oh.
This Eva did. And Eva, the one that didn't respond, my sister-in-law. Thank you, Eva. Oh, wow. So you're the hero's journey.
Oh my gosh. I've never felt like that before. So it's a description that is interesting to hear. I'm glad I'm
think about your separation, and that separation creating an opportunity for this transformation to happen. And it sometimes does look as painful and as harrowing as what you described. And this time had a physical impact on you.
Right. So then it turned into the obvious thing to do. I worked for a little while, but I was like, I'm really into this. I feel like this is important work I'm doing. And I became the go-to person for people who had questions about their nutrition and health, and they had seen, what had happened in my life. And I was like, I think that I need to take this one step further and just turn my career in this direction so that other people who are in this seated environment in the office, that are subject to different kinds of metabolic disruptions from extended sitting and chronic stress, I want to help them avoid, so that when life throws you a loop, maybe you get laid off, maybe your financial or your relationship falls apart for whatever reason, maybe someone in your family dies, you have some kind of crisis, your health is not already so tenuous that everything falls apart, right? There are things you can do to make yourself more resilient to weather those kinds of storms that life puts towards you. And when you have the capacity to deal with a stressor, then you can have post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress.
I like that, post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
I'm curious because, okay, devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
No, be devil's advocate. I think that's a terrible phrase to use. I don't want to ever be the advocate for the devil. But I'm curious, just looking at a different perspective, you had to go through a crisis in order to get to the point of what you're describing right now, and actually get to that post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about why it takes so many of us to get to that breaking point before we want to turn things around. Because I would dare say that I'm probably right now experiencing some things physically in my health that I should deal with right now. I feel overall pretty happy, but my body doesn't necessarily feel its best. And I'm curious about how many people that really wait until some crisis hits before they address it. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that's just human nature, that we're homeostatic creatures, right? We want things to kind of remain the same, although emotionally we do enjoy variety as well. But the body wants to stay the same. The brain is on automatic for like 99%, right? Some random statistic, high statistic, on automatic for most decisions. Our environment sets up most of the decisions in our life, and we kind of run on autopilot, only making decisions on like the things that are different, right? So if nothing is different in your life, if you don't have a crisis or an uncomfortableness at least come up and bring something to your brain's awareness, it's just going to keep on autopilot dealing with the things that need to be dealt with. And in our culture of extreme overwhelm and endless notifications and endless things that can be seen and done, our busy schedules and other people's expectations on us, most people aren't tuned into that small inner voice, listening to the signals that their bodies are telling them that could tell them before the crisis hits. But the world is so loud that they can't hear that. And so it takes a little bit of a crisis for the brain to realize, oh, this is a change that I need to do something about now. So for many people, that's a doctor's visit that says, your A1C is all too high, and your blood sugar is messed up. If you don't do something, you're going to have to go on medications. Or if they let it go further than that and they don't go to the doctor, suddenly they have a heart attack and they're like, where is this coming out of the blue from? And then they're like, oh, well, I need to take notice of this. And that's where people usually start to make a change. But you can know earlier if you make a point.
Yeah, I love what you just said about that small inner voice goes unnoticed so often. And there's so much out there that's loud. And if any, and there's so many of us that are tightly connected to all the external stimulation. And sometimes even without wanting to, we just are, because it overpowers our senses. I went on a 10-day, I've gone a couple of times now, but I went on a 10-day meditation session, a workshop that was really interesting, because there was no phones, we couldn't even read, no books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no talking. They had us, you can avoid eye contact with people. It was actually something that they encouraged. So eating our meals, we faced the wall.
Oh.
They didn't have to actually, sometimes when we make eye contact, people feel obligated somehow, that energy exchange is there. So it's really an opportunity to look inward for me. And I realized so many things about myself. For example, I realized I held so much of my tension and stress in my hips. We would meditate multiple hours a day, sometimes upwards 6-8 hours of meditation throughout a whole day. And I noticed where my body would tense up, or I noticed how much relief sometimes it was to not have to make eye contact with people. As naturally friendly and gregarious as I am, I also felt a sense of freedom, not having to be the nice person or be friendly, when having my energy directed inside. I didn't want to do it for 10 whole days. But the point I want to make there is that small, still inner voice that came out was way easier. It became very loud, actually, once all the external distraction was removed. So I'm curious, now that you know this, and now that you see this has such an impact on the body, and has such an impact on your life, quality of life, how do you cultivate those things? Like, what does one do now that you're aware?
Well, part of my internal motivation as well for making this a career choice was helping other people helps me practice more deeply. It keeps me reminded of the simple things, because, you can make all kinds of complicated protocols and morning routines, and you can just make it as complicated as you want. But when you pare it down to the simple things, if you have to explain something to a very beginner, it helps you understand it maybe a little more deeply, and keeps it on top of mind and a little bit more in your conscious awareness to practice. So I attend yoga more regularly now than I did in the past, but with a different intention too, on the focus of looking inward and listening to that voice. But at the same time, I like to practice with other people to still be in that community. And I'm starting to foster a little more community. That's how I'm implementing it at this time.
I don't want to sound patronizing by saying I'm really proud of you. But I am. I have a feeling of pride right now because of who you described you were in your very early years, and the way in which you coped by pulling away from people. And you have such a gift to share. Who you are now is really available to be a gift to others because of your journey, not in spite of it.
Right.
Oh, beautiful. I want to, Eva's been really active in sharing some of her thoughts. I want to bring her into this conversation.
Yeah.
Go ahead and unmute yourself and share with us what's on your mind.
Hello? You hear me?
Of course, we do.
Hi. Hi, Heather. It's been a pleasure listening to your story. I just love your journey, and I truly think that is a hero's journey. The way you went down and you were able to heal yourself and go up again, and now you are, you are inspiring other people and helping other people. That's really amazing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I love what you said about the smile. And it's funny because, it's been a while, like some months ago, I started to feel like, you know what, I think I'm not smiling very much. Like I would look at the mirror and my smile was kind of funny. And I'm like, so I know it's like, it's a very simple thing to do, but what you say, just to smile, what helped me a lot was to remember something that I love. I will think of my husband, I will think of my friend's puppy, I will think of, my family, things that make me happy, nature, flowers, whatever. And then it will be easier for me to smile and I wouldn't feel so weird about it. And then that helped me also to be present to things that matter to me. So it's like it was helping me both ways. It was helping me to connect to myself at that level, So I think that's very useful. And I have a question for you. So, I've always been very active and always done a lot of sports and stuff. And like 2 years ago, I started to have this body problems. And now I'm like trying to find my therapy. But so basically I cannot go to the gym and do a lot of strength exercises. So I used to do yoga, and I do yoga and I like yoga, but I cannot do a lot of yoga either. But anyways, I noticed myself that I really need the exercise a lot. My body is starting to be I've never had problem with weight, but what happens now is like my muscles are losing strength and are getting very thin because I don't do anything with them. I walk a lot, but that's about it. So I don't know, I know this is kind of like out of the blue, but what do you think it will be the best thing for me? I know like I've been doing some yoga stretches and stuff, and I have my weights at home, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if there is any kind of exercise that will help me with my muscles, or any kind of something I can do to start restoring.
Yes, there absolutely is. And there's never really a point that someone's too far gone that they can't do something to move, right? And if you feel like that your muscles are a little bit like wasting away, and that will naturally happen as someone ages unless they specifically do some kind of strength or resistance training. And resistance can be against gravity. So everyone has everything they need on their body to work the muscles that work. So you can do body weight exercises. If you have light hand weights, maybe you can get a little bit more variety just for fun. But I would definitely start out with things that are going to use your whole body weight. So if you can't do push-ups, maybe you can hold a plank for a second and then lower yourself down only, just like a reverse push-up. If you need a little bit more assistance in that, you can do it at an angle against a counter, so it won't be so much. I like to pre-gress people. So if you can't even do the form, like what do you do to get to the good form before you even add any kind of weight? But for most people, their body weight is more than sufficient. And you can just find the level that you are now and move from there. A very important exercise that I think is helpful for people, especially as they get into like, I don't know, over 40 until forever, is a squat. And that is basically getting up from a seated position. So the first thing to do is see how many seconds, like do a little experiment. on a regular chair with your feet flat and not using your hands to push up, stand up and sit down 5 times and have someone time that for you. And, then of your exercises, then you have a baseline. And as you get stronger, that time should become shorter. Like if you did squat exercises in whatever progression, like if you have your own trainer or if someone worked with me, we would see, okay, here's where you started, here's how long it took you to do this. Or maybe it's a stand up, walk across the room and come back. How long does that take you? And then when you do your exercises for the month or whatever, you'll do that test again and see how much time it takes at that time. And that's how you move to knowing how much more to add to your program, how you can progress. So
I'm gonna jump in there real quick. First of all, thank you so much, Eva, for your question, because I do think that there are people, and I love the idea of progress. We don't have to be, we don't have to go to some crazy fitness boot camp to get started, right? That doesn't work if you've not been active. But I do like.
And if you've been stressed, it can be too much stress.
Absolutely. So I love the idea that you have of just kind of working up to it. I do want to be mindful of our time. We've hit the hour mark, but so I want to make sure I clarify that that's the official end. But we want to. There's I think a couple more comments that we might be able to talk about before we officially log off. But I want to be respectful for those that might have to disconnect because of the time. Please do so. And I want to invite you all to join me next week. We have a wonderful conversation this week. I'm starting what I like to call my Best Bosses series. So I've invited a former boss of mine, Jonathan Chaplow, will actually be joining us because he was one of the people who led a team, my team specifically, or his team, through the 2008 recession. We were going through some massive changes, but it became one of the best teams I've ever worked with. And Jonathan's just a wonderful mentor of mine as well. So I'm inviting him to talk a little bit about that experience and what he does to keep things alive for a group of people and for himself. So join us on July 30th to listen to Jonathan and his sharing about how he does that. In the meantime, those of you that have to jump off, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back to Heather. So I think you might have a few more comments for Eva. And I also wanted to literally piggyback on a question Eva asked. She does a lot of walking, she said. I wonder, is there something that one could add to their typical just natural walk, maybe just weights or something like that, that would also do what you were describing, Heather?
Yes, thank you for that one.
Yeah, you can walk a little bit faster, do tiny intervals. And the way I've been experimenting with some parasympathetic techniques on exercise, so making sure that you're breathing through your nose and then walk as fast as you can until the point you can't breathe through your nose anymore, and then come back to more of a slower walk. So you can do these intervals, but you won't stress yourself too much before you come back and get that resilience. And it's working hard, but not so much that your body starts freaking out. When you breathe through your mouth, that's a sympathetic response. It's activating you. They say fight and flight, but really it's activation, right? Of that side of the nervous system that makes you prepared. So if you're only breathing through your nose, your body's still like, okay, I'm fine. This is fine. This is enough. This is an exertion that's within my comfort zone, right? So you can develop a little bit more while not stressing your body.
So very interesting.
Very gentle, high intensity intervals. You could do the same thing on a bicycle. It's very low impact, super fun to be outside. If you have a straightaway, kind of zoom as hard as you can until you have to open your mouth to breathe, and then slow it back down, gear down. That's a way that you can increase your intensity with just body weight.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I like that. And I like what you said about, it's funny, like starting from, when you say about the push-ups, like using a piece of furniture or something and start very slow and then go up. And I think that talks about, for me, like my patience is not, my patience level, it's always been a struggle. So I think it's going to be good for me also to just be mindful of, like, sometimes if I need to start from zero, it's okay. I just need to be patient with myself instead of expecting me to be how I used to be, and just live in my past. Like, oh, I used to have this body. I used to be able to do this, and now I cannot do that. But helping me to be patient and just do that. So thank you for reminding me of that. That helps me a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
I think this is interesting, going off a little bit from what Eva shared. With me, one of the things that I've noticed is my one of my brothers, my younger brother, has moved to Dallas, the Dallas area. He and his wife have 5 kids, all between the age of 2 and 13. So they're really active kids and just fun. And the more time I've spent with them, the more I'm realizing that physically it's harder to keep up with some of the activities that they want to do. But I also realize how much play is important to me in fitness. So where some of the things that you were describing to Eva seem to be more, being at home or something that's a little bit more conservative, let's say, I notice that play for me is almost essential. I love playing tennis, for example. So I'm curious about what you would say to that and movement and how to maybe add an extra level of challenge. Although I don't think I need an extra level. I just need to hang out with them.
Hang on a second. I think I just got a notice I need to plug my computer in, which is weird. So hang on, let me make sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so while you're doing that, this has been really fascinating. I think I've learned so much from what you've shared so far, Heather. I just want to recap some of the things that you shared with us. One, and I'm going to just mention that one is breathing. I think what you shared about the nose breathing kind of being the indicator to body. Almost what I heard is almost like the level of stress, the body is under. If we can still nose breathe necessarily, it doesn't require the body to get into what you said, activation, that fight or flight start, the response. And being able to breathe through our nose while we do some rapid movement is an opportunity for us to see how fit we are. When we have to start breathing through our mouth is what I get, that is really when our body now has hit the mark where now it has to activate something in order for us to be able to resist or sustain what it's capable of doing. So fascinating. I love that. Eva, I'm also curious, what have you gotten besides, you mentioned the smile was one thing that was important to you. Anything else that's resonated from what Heather shared so far?
I think for me is more like the way what she had to overcome to do that, to be where she is, right? So, I've always feel fascinated by people's journey, and it's been my journey also. So I think I just love when people are able to come from the dark part of their lives and come back and really be somebody great and amazing and transform and helping other people. So that's what I really like about her story and her commitment to health and her commitment to herself, and I love that she decided to go back to her family, even though the relationship was not like the best, and how that helped her also. I mean, for me, it's very important. Family, I'm very close to my family, but I always feel like I always seen that people who have trouble with family, sometimes part of themselves need to heal. I don't know, it's like we are so connected, right? So, or our roots or where we come from. So yeah, I just love that part.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Eva. I know, Heather, you had some issues. There's some loud laughter there in the background.
That's my husband, Eduardo. I don't know what the heck is.
Oh, okay.
He's cracking up. I'm going to mute myself. Okay,
got it. Thank you. Heather, thank you. Welcome back. I'm sorry that your computer sounds like it may have lost some juice.
Yeah, thank you for bearing with me. I just had one more thing that I wanted to add as a takeaway for people. Besides the smiling, another way that you can, exercise that you can do to inhibit that stress response is to exhale slowly. So it's not just taking a deep breath, it's like extending that exhale longer than the inhale. And this can make impact in as little as one breath. It's very effective if you do it 3, maybe 5 breaths. And it can really change your state. So it's a you right before you eat to activate that rest and digest response and kind of calm yourself down from the hecticness of your day. Or if you're in a state of stress, just slowing down your exhale can make you a little bit more able to be aware instead of your brain being hijacked.
I thank you so much, Heather. I think you gave some super practical tips for people. I mean, smiling, holding a pen in your mouth, for goodness sakes, breathing through our nose, exhaling slowly. There's so many things I think that our body can do to really reroute, right, that the experience of stress that might come upon someone. So I love that you said that. How can people get a hold of you if they want to continue this conversation with you, or if they want to do some of this work that you do with others?
Yeah, for sure. My website, heatherlynndarby.com. And I was so glad that you said my whole name at the beginning, because that is, in fact, my brand, and it's the easiest way to get in touch with me. There are downloadable resources on fitness and nutrition for busy professionals. Someone can schedule a consultation with me right from there, heatherlynndarby.com. And if someone wants to kind of get a little bit more into my world, I have a Facebook community. It's called Excellent Vitality Experiment. And excellent is a story we didn't talk about, but as my nickname from Usenet, it's XLNT.
Oh, I think I've seen it, and I didn't understand what that stood for. Very good. I will make sure to put that in the notes for this show, for the session, so that people can connect to those different links. If you could just send me the excellent one, just to make sure I get that one right, that'd be fantastic. Heather, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for taking time this morning to share your story with us, for expanding yourself on a public forum, like you said you're doing more and more now. And then also for some of the tips that you shared. I think the level of awareness that you might have brought to people about the impact of our physiology on our nervous system is phenomenal. So I really, really do thank you so much for your time today.
Having me today and letting me share.
Absolutely. All right. Look forward to seeing the rest of you back next week. Well, you're welcome to, not just the rest of you. Heather, you're welcome to come back too. Next week, when we talk to Jonathan Chappell, like I mentioned, about his experience being a boss during the recession and what he does to keep his team coming to life and also coming to life himself. Thank you all so much. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Have a good rest of your day, wherever you are in the world. Have a wonderful week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.